Welcome to Pro Wrestling Inside and Out. Rodney is looking for something, and evidently
Got it.
it's a blue pin that he was trying to
Use my
find.
fantastic blue
And-
pen. I have this one here, but it's not a good kind. I don't even let me throw that garbage. Okay.
As Rodney is looking for his blue pin, we are looking for the best moments in professional wrestling. I'm going to start this out. One of the best moments in professional wrestling that I can remember back in the day was when Dusty Rhodes got jumped in the parking lot. He came staggering down the aisle at the Atlanta City Auditorium for many, almost a year. They showed it as a bumper on Georgia Championship Wrestling. I think that was one of the best moments in wrestling history. Drew a lot of money for over a year or two in Georgia Championship Wrestling. Rodney, what do you think about that moment?
Oh, it is one of the best. In fact, I've often said this was better than the Dusty and Ole in the cage. Just a tremendous thing. In fact, that whole year of 1978 was a banner year. I mean, that place was on fire. If they would have had pay-per-view back then, you never know how much money they would have made. It would have been huge. Ole and Ivan Koloff, just a tremendous team. Even Dusty wasn't there all the time. And then, of course, in that same year, Wrestling 2 and Superstar had their feud. The first round of their feud was just a great year. Just an awesome year.
Dusty Rhodes being jumped into the parking lot.
Well, of course, I only got to hear about it. I didn't get to see that. But I all these years later, I hear this from a lot of people, who did see it and who talk to this day about how significant it was in their viewing of the product back then. They absolutely bought everything about it, which is why we do what we do or should be. And it lives on. That's there's billions probably angles that are just dead out there that nobody remembers. But if you were there, if you heard about this, you remember it.
All right, Rodney.
In fact, if you remember, Dusty, when he came back to Atlanta with Jim Crockett Promotion, he talked about that incident more so than the cage. He talked about being jumped in the parking lot by Ole Anderson back in '78. It was just huge, absolutely huge. For me, one of the big, as I stated in one of the other shows, one of the big things was Jerry Lawler and Andy Kaufman. Just huge, brought a lot of attention to wrestling, and not just Memphis, but in general, all over the place. People were talking about it. Bill Watts talked about it on Mid-South Wrestling, and of course, supported Lawler in his endeavor of these people trying to get into the wrestling business, have no business in it. And of course, I think he kind of tied that all in with Cornette. He thought Cornette shouldn't be in it either. That was the storyline at the time. But yeah, Lawler and Kaufman. Just huge stuff.
If you've not watched it, you can go to YouTube. There is a whole videos. They'll show everything from the time Andy Kaufman came in and wrestled ladies, and then Foxy Brown, I believe, was the name of the lady that almost beat him right there in Memphis at the Mid-South Coliseum. Tremendous stuff. I will agree, Rodney. I think it changed the history of wrestling and really changed what maybe even Miss McMahon looked at wrestling as being. Jack, what do you think about Andy Kaufman, Jerry the King Lawler?
I loved that whole buildup. And in fact, until we got to reviewing this last year, I didn't realize how much Andy Kaufman was actually in Memphis. I always thought this was basically just a handful of matches, but he was there for a long time. And he put his whole heart and soul into everything that he did there. And Andy Kaufman was pivotal, however you say that word. And not only Memphis wrestling, it certainly put them on the map, but it brought wrestling as a whole into the national consciousness. And I think this is huge. It's a huge deal.
And I think one of the biggest moments of that is Andy Kaufman, Jerry Lawler on the David Letterman show. That put Jerry Lawler on the map as being one of the big superstars in professional wrestling. If you didn't know Jerry Lawler, you knew him after that show. And with David Letterman saying you can say some of those words on television, but what I have said over and over and over again, you cannot throw coffee. And that was, I'll remember that.
You know, one of the best things ever was when Kaufman and Jimmy Hart went against Jerry Lawler and they reviewed the match. And Jimmy Hart and Kaufman got into it. That was classic TV. And I'll have to admit, Jimmy Hart could stay right up with Kaufman. I mean, or should I say, Kaufman could stay right up with Jimmy Hart. Just great stuff. If you haven't seen that, check it out. It's beautiful. Beautiful.
Tremendous. You know, that is one program in professional wrestling that what a memory. All right, Jack.
Now we ventured north for my pick.
Mhm.
And that was the war to settle the score.
Yes.
That opened the doors for WWF at the time, to take off running and begin their dominance of professional wrestling for years to come. It happened on MTV. It was the only match. It was Hogan against Roddy Piper for the WWF Championship. It was the only match shown on MTV that night. Blockbuster ratings, and led, of course, to WrestleMania, and and the rest is history. But that is probably, to me, one of the most significant events in our most recent history.
Yeah, I would agree, because I can remember Alan Hunt. Was that his name? Alan Hunt was the actual announcer at that. Was that his
It
name?
was the MTV VJ or whatever.
Or Alan something. I remember he was the DJ, and him talking about it, and it was just so well done. And Roddy Piper was so hated, during this time. And by the way, I do not blame Roddy Piper for not doing the job for Hulk Hogan that night. I do not blame him. He shouldn't have done it. He stood up and said, I'm not going to do it. And he shouldn't have. I think it was a pull apart, wasn't it?
I believe that's what it was. This is a disqualification. I remember.
And Mr. T got involved, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good
And
stuff.
it made sense, because if he would have beat him that night, there would have been no reason for the match for WrestleMania.
Exactly.
It would have led up to WrestleMania for sure.
I'm going back to Georgia Championship Wrestling. I believe this would have been 1979. 1979. Ole Anderson, Ivan Koloff against Tommy Rich, and I believe Chief Wally McDaniel, and Tommy Rich gets his hair cut on television. Tremendous matches to follow up with it. Scared me to death every time, because Tommy and Ole would fight over the scissors, and I just knew somebody was going to lose an eye. Tremendous matches, just tremendous all the way through. Tommy Rich was such a professional in that. A lot of people say something about Tommy Rich, but such a professional in all that. Made sure he cut his hair, make it all messed up all the time, so he continuously looked bad. And it was just a tremendous time, and it drew a tremendous amount of money in Georgia. I don't know. Did you get to see that, Jack?
Oh yeah, I was there during that time. Yep, sure was.
Oh, that was so good stuff. That was good stuff. Rodney, Tommy Rich.
That was tremendous, and that led to the big, as I was talking about, one of the biggest houses I've ever seen for a small town was in Cartersville, Georgia, at the high school football stadium. Ole and Ivan against Wally McDaniels and Tommy Rich. Just tremendous stuff. Again, that was in that 78. There was no better time in Georgia than that year. It was just awesome.
Okay, Rodney.
My next one is just one that set the Junkyard Dog on fire, and I'm talking about the war with the Freebirds, and actually made stars of them as well. It really set the standard for the Freebirds, especially. It really solidified them as major stars, as well as the Junkyard Dog. This situation was heard everywhere. Everybody was talking about it. Even in Georgia, we were talking about it, about the Junkyard Dog. And of course, when we said Junkyard Dog, we were talking about Norvell Austin. No, there's another guy that they're called the Junkyard Dog there. And it was just awesome stuff. And they drew with that all over.
Yeah, the blindness of the Junkyard Dog Probably one of the hottest things I think ever happened in Mid-South Wrestling. Jack, what do you think about the blinding of the Junkyard Dog, or just the feud with the Junkyard Dog? I would guess.
Yeah, that whole storyline. Of course, I didn't get to see that live. I've gone back, tried to watch, what I can find on it. But all the magazines covered that. That was a huge deal. I remember sitting in Columbus, Georgia, with all the group of fans that I sat with at the time, and instead of us talking about the matches that were coming up that night, we're talking about the Junkyard Dog and the Freebirds and all that was going on. I mean, it made a huge impact all over the wrestling world.
All right,
and let's remember. Actually, the Junkyard Dog against Michael Hayes set the wrestling attendance record for the Superdome at that time.
Yes.
Nothing has ever been that big. The Midnight Express against Bill Watson, Junkyard Dog came close, but it did not reach Hayes and against Junkyard Dog.
All right, Jack, I believe it is your time. Another best.
It is my time, and now I move back a little south to Memphis, which I thought one of the most significant matches coming out of there with Jerry Lawler was Jerry Lawler and Austin Idol in a chicken wire cage match. And just to set the image for this, that chicken wire was not attached to the ring. It was built up like what's the WWE cage deal they do where it's on the floor.
Sits on the floor, yeah.
Yeah, and this was the first time I had ever seen that. So anyway, they had a great match. There was a hot angle leading up to that. Great match. Jerry Lawler is handing Austin his tail in there. And then out of nowhere, because he's been there since 2 hours before the gates open, Tommy Rich comes out from under the ring and attacks Jerry Lawler. And that was, we discussed this recently, almost a riot on their hand. It took several attempts. And to Jerry Lawler's credit, once they killed him, he never moved. He laid there and sold it. Didn't try to stop anything. I'm sure he was grinning because he knew money was coming in. But this was, such a huge deal. And again, that shows you what an impact Tommy Rich had wherever he went back then.
And see, that's the thing. You'll hear people say that Tommy Rich's career ended in Georgia in 1983, 84, but that is not true. I believe that Austin Idol and Tommy Rich with Jerry Lawler is the last sellouts that they had in Memphis.
I believe so.
And again, Tommy Rich drew money everywhere he went, and he did that. He did not end in 1984. He drew money in Continental. And then he went over here and drew a ton of money. Great angle during that time. Now I'm going to move all the way to 1998. I believe it was 1998. Steve Austin and Vince McMahon. Just that feud alone was a great moment in wrestling. Tremendous stuff they did with each other and drew a lot of money. Drew some of the biggest ratings, even though they think it was all the cussing and all that stuff that did it. But that was tremendous stuff. Rodney, Vince McMahon, and Steve Austin.
Yeah, the last real rivalry that they've had. I don't think they've had anything to that extent. In fact, I don't think they won it. They would already be doing it. But the last great rivalry was between Vince McMahon and Steve Austin, and it was TV gold. It really was. And Austin was doing something that had really never been seen before on television, and especially against the Boss. So it was tremendous, absolutely tremendous.
Jack, what do you think about Steve Austin, Vince McMahon?
I thought that was great stuff. There was nobody at that point, nobody more over than Steve Austin in the business. Counterpoint to that was nobody had more heat than Vince McMahon. Yep. So it was a perfect setup. I thought they pulled that off exceedingly well, considering Vince is not really a wrestler. Yeah. But boy, he sure went out there and put everything he had into it. It's just great stuff.
Great stuff. And if we ever talk about the worst moment in turning Steve Austin heel, that was one of the worst. Now, Rodney, One more for you, and then we'll see.
Again, it's what we've experienced, but one of the great things was really the second part of the Ron Fuller against Bob Armstrong, where Bob Armstrong lost the loser leaving the cage and came back as the Bullet. That was just tremendous stuff, and it took us from, I mean, it was 86, went through September, normally slow, went through it like nothing ever happened. I mean, it was just gangbuster business, and you had the great experience of Bob Armstrong, and then Ron Fuller. It was just great stuff, and then all the other great talent, Jerry Stubbs and Jody Hamilton, and just tremendous, Jimmy Golden. I mean, it was just a great time.
Yes. Yeah, I'll agree. That was great stuff. And the Bullet was over. Bob Armstrong as the Masked Bullet was so over. And we can attest to that fact because we were selling his merchandise and we would sell out on Mondays and not have nothing to sell the rest of the weekend. So that's how over he was. What do you think about that angle? We talked about that not long ago about Bob Armstrong being turned on by Robert Fuller. Jack?
Oh, I thought it was great stuff. Bob was so, I don't think unless you were from the Southeast, I don't know that you really understand how significantly over Bob was. He was the man and remained so his entire career.
Yeah. Out of all the wrestlers that were wrestling Southeastern Championship Wrestling, and I'm talking about the North end, not the Southern end, not the Tennessee end of there, but Bob Armstrong was probably the most over. That would continuously draw you money year after year after year after year, while others may not have drew as much money. But Bob Armstrong, you go put him on the card, he'd draw you every time, and that's just he was over.
And that was no matter who it was, whether it was Nick Goulas, whether later on Cornette had him up there in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, drew tremendous money. Bob Armstrong.
Yep. All right, Jack. Last one for you. Best moments.
Again, I go back to the WWF. Of course, we talked about the war to settle the score, but honestly, the next biggest and probably the most important match in the history of WWF, WrestleMania 3, Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant.
Yep.
What was that, 93,000 at the Silverdome? And just tremendous crowd, big pay-per-view event. And a great card. I mean, let's not forget that the match that is consistently voted one of the best matches in history was Savage and Steamboat was not the draw. That was the extra icing on the cake. Andre and Hogan, those two guys sold 93,000 tickets. That was totally on them. Everybody else benefited from it. Those were the guys who brought the people in. Vince was the one who put that tremendous show together in his staff. And really, they've never looked back. But that match is significant for a lot of reasons. It was Andre's last really big high-profile match. That was the proverbial passing of the torch to Hogan. And while Hogan was already established, this, I believe, put him over that threshold of being a great wrestler to a real superstar.
Yeah, I agree. And that was the turning point in the territories as well. That would make the difference in territories. So when you talk about moments, that was the change when WWF, they became the leader in wrestling and everyone else just couldn't catch up to Vince McMahon and the WWF. Let's go now to the insiders and see. They've come up with some good stuff over here. They've come up with some great stuff, and we'll see. Michael Barr asked this question. He said, did Continental Championship Wrestling, when it was a TV deal, try that gimmick with Austin Idol? Yes, he got jumped at that little gas station.
Yes.
Right before you get to the TV station. Yes.
He sure did.
I don't know how well it was received. I don't know, but I believe it did draw. It was Jimmy Golden that jumped him, right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, they did do that. So yeah, that was.
Did the news cover that? I believe they did.
I'm not.
Michael, did the news TVY go out there and cover that? The local news there.
I believe they did. I believe it was on the news.
I believe, and I actually think it happened there because from what I remember from the footage that I've seen, they had witnesses saying that Jimmy Golden did it.
And Jimmy Golden said no, that somebody didn't like Austin Idol and beat him.
Well, that could have been anybody.
That's true. That was true. All right. Boxing guy Brian Young said Lawler totally dropped the ball with the Coffin thing big time. I will explain the detail when we speak. All right. We'd like to hear that.
Yep.
Rodney, Dusty talked about that in response to Ole and Arn jumping on Thunderbolt.
Sure did.
Great stuff. Boxing, Brian said no disrespect to Jerry Lawler. That's right. Well, now you evidently didn't hear Rodney on our live show.
I did say nothing. I said those were awesome world championship matches. That's all I said. And I don't know how anybody could read any more into that.
This, Michael Barr, it is a great moment. And we'll do another great moments in wrestling. And this was great. It was the brainchild of Rodney West, by the way. The Nightmares took the sledgehammer. It was not the Nightmares that did it. It was the other way around, wasn't it? When Robert Fuller and Jimmy Golden took the stuff. I don't remember a sledgehammer being to a New Rock though. That was done there.
No, not that I remember. We will tell a story later on about when Ken Wayne actually won the IROC from Danny Davis, and we actually found one that was wrecked, and so when Danny Davis won it back, when he was supposed to give it back, we were going to bring it in on this wrecked IROC, blue exact year and everything, and brought it in, but powers that be there did not want to do that.
I think it was Robert Fuller and Jimmy Golden that took the baseball bat to the IROC. And through Kenny Wayne, through Danny Davis in the trunk, every bit of that stuff Rodney talked. He actually come up with that, and Robert Fuller used it. It was some good stuff, and now they might have done something like that.
And just so everybody knows, the IROC made a full recovery because I got to actually ride with Danny a few trips for that.
We will have to look that up, Michael, because that sounds like different than what we were talking about.
Yeah, they may have done that. They may have done it, but I don't remember it being done, and it could have been done while we weren't there. So we'll have to look that up. Brian said, but could have and should have been more. All right. Robert Grimes.
The Lawler and Kaufman.
Yeah. The old Southeastern days under all the banners were standard for selling storylines. Dotha was the mecca, at least for me. Great storylines were done in Dothan, Alabama. Bob Armstrong, Ron Fuller feud was tremendous. It was tremendous. Nightmares, Tommy Rich, Johnny Rich, tremendous. Coffin was a star at the time as well. Yes, he had just come off of, or was he on Taxi at the time?
I don't remember if he was still on because he left before the series ended. But he was still a nationally known name.
Yeah, he was still making all the late night talk shows.
Yeah.
Boxing guy Brian, war to settle the score. Huge, good pick. It was great. The way they did it was so tremendous. Also, Brian says Greg Valentine versus Wally McDaniel with a broken leg. That was great. And the interview that he talks about is also tremendous, by the way, when he talks about what he's going to do when he comes back. Michael Barr, what about the match when Mr. Wrestling 2 wrestled against the imposter, Mr. Wrestling 2? That could have been a whole lot better, but
I was at the Columbus match. There was no rematch. I felt sorry for the guy. I mean, he was just doing what he was told, but by golly, 2 was not happy about any of that and did not give him the time of day.
He didn't. He beat him. Man, he beat him bad.
And then they turned that guy babyface. And then he came back as a special referee. Who was it that was supposed to have set that up? Because it was
Superstar.
Okay,
think.
it was two and Superstar having the match, and then what was that guy's name? Joe something.
Joe Powell.
Joe Powell. Joe was special referee, and halfway through the match, his referee pants split. So the whole match was people cheering for two and laughing at Joe and booing. It was just a mixture, It was not good, and I don't think I ever saw Joe again after that.
Hey, by the way, Joe did a great wrestling too.
He did. He wasn't bad at all in the ring.
No,
But you just don't get on two's bad side.
Oh, and if you're going to do that, you had better ask Wrestling 2 for the permission.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, it would found out that Joe Powell was going around the different shows and doing wrestling too, not with Georgia Championship Wrestling, but going to what we call the outlaw groups and doing it, and that's what got him.
Well, I didn't know the whole story about that. I just know that I would have hated to have been in his shoes. And I've been in tag matches where my tag partner, the two did not like. And it was a long night for them tag partners.
There weren't many people, not many people that could take Wrestling 2. So, Richard, the Freebirds had a real heat because of the Blind with Junkyard Dog. Yes, tremendous heat. Michael Barr, who wrestled as the Junkyard Dog out of Georgia, I do not know, Norville Austin did the Junkyard Dog. He was the original Junkyard Dog, but Junkyard Dog and Norville Austin teamed as the Junkyard Dogs in Knoxville, I believe the Southeastern Championship Wrestling. I remember when Vince was so called in the hospital and Steve Austin came in and unhooked the equipment and beat Vince, the bedside man. That was tremendous.
And Vince's reaction is just great. His reaction is just great while he's hitting him in the head with the paint.
Yeah, and that involved Mick Foley too, because that was the debut of Saka.
It was just tremendous television. That was tremendous television. It really was. I heard recently that Vince angles were unplanned consequences of the Montreal screw job. I believe to a certain extent they had it in their minds that Vince McMahon was, because he was in Memphis doing prior to that being a heel. So I think they were going to move toward that because people didn't like Vince even prior to that. They boo him and what was that guy's name that was the president? Jack Tunney.
Jack Tunney.
Yep.
They boo him out of the building every time they talk about him. Only turning on Dusty was the best angle. Yes, that was good.
It was a good setup.
The only problem, great setup, but man, it made Dusty look bad. And it didn't draw the money they thought it was going to draw, because it did make Dusty look like he was just an idiot.
Now it drew that night.
Yes, it drew that night.
But from that point forward, there were so many things that it not only made Dusty look bad, but you had Lars Anderson becoming cementing himself as a babyface when he just was not over enough to be in that position. There was just so many things that was not done right from that. Yeah.
Oh, and those Ole and Lars matches, they kill your territory.
Man,
those were horrible. So many great wrestlers and matches that can be talked about in Continental Championship Wrestling. Just so much talent in the area. Not that this is where I live. Yeah, it's tremendous. Yeah. Dothan, Alabama was really a mecca of wrestling. I mean, tremendous stuff. And what they didn't understand, 5,000 people every Saturday night for years would come to see wrestling. Now, I'm not going to say there was 5,000 people there all the time, because there were times when we were there was 400 people in the building. But the quality of that TV show, though, it showed how strong television was, because do something that they wanted to see, 5,000 people would come out to the building. So Robert Grice said it was on the news in Dothan.
Yeah,
Austin Idol being beat up,
and it seems like that the whole thing with the interview of the witnesses was from TVY, the news department.
Yes, they did, Rodney. It was Red Holland Store, just down the road from the WTVY studio. Stopped in there many times.
Michael, do you ever go to TVY studios when they had wrestling there?
And then Michael Barr said, yes, WTVY did go to the gas station. Michael Barr, I meant who wrestled as a Junkyard Dog other than Norville Austin, just Sylvester Ritter. I don't know if anybody else that wrestled as a Junkyard Dog. Do y'all?
I've never heard anybody else.
After Sylvester, nobody wanted to. They afraid they get beat up by him. What about the cage matches? The Cactus Jack was in with the barbed wire and the tacks on the mat. Yeah, you know, I think the first time, great moment. After that, just stupid moments. I think they overdone it. They overdone that. That wasn't meant to be done though. The first time it was done, it just fell through it. You know, made for. I wouldn't have got up. I'd been dead. So they'd have just carried me out of there.
Yeah, I actually watched a documentary on that on the WWE Network recently. That I mean, the spot of coming off the top onto the announcer's table was planned, but where they came back up again and then he got power bombed through the top, that was not supposed to happen.
Yeah, that just broke loose. Whew, man, and that tooth was sticking through his nose. Oh, it was just horrible, horrible stuff. I've watched it 10 times. I thought it was very bad. Inoki and
we've watched it. I just wanted to make sure it was that bad, so I just kept watching it over and over again just to make sure to see if I got the same reaction.
I had to give. Hey, I have all the respect in the world for Mick Foley. I think for what he put himself through, I have to respect him for what he's done. Inoki and Ali could have been, plus Andre versus Chick Webner on undercard, but nope. Tell a pretty detailed explanation of it. The Wrestler's Wrestler. So if you have not got the Wrestler's Wrestler,
Yes.
it's available on Amazon.
Amazon Prime or Amazon. Yeah. Which if you have Amazon, you get Amazon Prime for free. So there's a free plug for Amazon.
That's right. I believe you is shipping free at Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
I thought it was. The Farm Center drew when the show was local. Yes, it did draw better. It did draw better when they had a television program on WTBY.
Yes.
You know,
and honestly, with what they were paying for the production there, should have kept that production as is.
Yeah.
And because the reason that the show moved is because of Knoxville and Birmingham were demanding better production quality, because Vince was coming with his production, WCW were coming with theirs, or NWA had theirs. So they had to improve the production, had to make an investment there. But Dothan was fine, and they could have kept the local show there and should have. Yeah,
they should have done that show. Yes, Rodney, many times I got my first mask from Jerry Stubbs there.
We fell off the bleachers there. We went both backwards, turn and flip onto the floor.
We did. Yeah, the wheels that were underneath fell off. When they did, we took the bump right off of that thing. The studio fans went wild a few times there. Yes, when Bob Armstrong returned after being the bad guy and coming back and saving Ron Fuller, the place went nuts. Robert Gross said that Foley said he was unconscious when he hit the mat. I could see that.
I believe that.
That was brutal. And Michael Barr said, I was in the Army Reserve when I first started going to the studio. Well, we hope everyone enjoyed this video on best moments in wrestling. That's just some of the best moments in wrestling. If you've watched wrestling as long as we have and been around it as long as you've seen some great stuff in wrestling, and not just the stuff from Georgia Championship Wrestling. No matter what you want to say about Vince McMahon, he has created some great moments in professional wrestling. Those are not just that's the ones we talked about tonight. That was just a few of the things that he did in professional wrestling. The territories, some great stuff, and we will come back and do part 2 of the best moments in wrestling. If you enjoyed this video, give us the big thumbs up. Subscribe to the page if you haven't already. It's absolutely free. Go one step further, hit that notification bell, and watch the video right there next to Rodney. There's no telling what will come up, but watch the video. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next video right here on Pro Wrestling